Good morning and welcome to our webinar on opportunities in global e-commerce markets presented by Global Wide Media. What we're going to do in the next 35-40 minutes is look at a whole lot of different things that relate to opportunities in global e-commerce. In particular, I'm going to set the big picture trends that inform specific opportunities. And we'll chat a little bit about Q4 opportunities as well. Obviously, this is the key time right now around the holiday selling season, and we're taking a particularly global view of the holiday period because a lot of different holidays are happening in a lot of different places, creating all kinds of opportunities for all of us. Briefly, for myself, just introduce my background. So I'm the Senior Vice President of E-commerce, Mobile and Asia Pacific for Global Wide Media. I've got a long background in internet company development and a specific both passion and experience base around the Asia Pacific region, which is a theme that will wend its way through my presentation this morning. Real quick introduction to Global Wide Media. So we call ourselves a data-driven global internet marketing services company. We're based in Los Angeles and also have offices in Victoria, British Columbia, London, and Hong Kong. We drive around $3 billion in annual e-commerce sales for our partners. This year we should install about 50 million mobile apps. We've run 24,000 campaigns in over 100 countries over the last 10 years. We have 910 million global audience profiles, and this last summer we unified our three core brands, Neverblue, Pulse Mobile, and Global Wide, to live under the Global Wide Media brand. As many of you will know, we operate one of the world's largest affiliate networks, and this year we should drive somewhere between 40 and 50 million e-commerce transactions around the world. In my next screen here, just listing some of the key brands that we work with in the e-commerce space. Really kind of a who's who of international e-commerce from Europe, the United States, and Asia Pacific. And one of our key corporate objectives is to pursue leadership in international e-commerce. And to us, leadership means three things. It means, number one, to stay on top of the key global trends in e-commerce. Number two, to deliver a large and varied portfolio of e-commerce deals to our distribution partners. And finally, to deliver broad-based and long-term campaign partnerships, both in the distribution side of the business as well as the merchant side of the business. Now, turning to kind of the heart of my presentation this morning, the central thesis that I'm delivering here this morning is that we're living in a new golden age of e-commerce. And if you look in history, there have been different periods of time where these golden ages have happened, going back to the 1700s and the spice trade out of Southeast Asia, and then the period between the 1880s and World War I. And in each of these cases, golden ages of commerce were driven by technology innovations. In the first case, through innovations in sailing technology, and in the 1880s around railways, electricity, steel, autos, and so on. And our current age of golden commerce, current golden age of e-commerce is no different in the sense that it's driven by innovations in technology and also developments around geography. So the three key platforms that are driving this new golden age of e-commerce are logistics, mobile technology, international payments, and then finally China. On the logistics side, the major companies that are involved in e-commerce around the world are making very large investments in the so-called last mile capability. to deliver immediate gratification to consumers who buy online. And just as some examples of some of these investments that are moving things forward in logistics, just this past month, Alibaba Group made a significant investment into Cainiao, which is a China-based logistics company. And Cainiao invested or announced a relationship with the United States Postal Service to enhance deliverability of products into the United States for their AliExpress platform and marketplace. Alibaba also invested $138 million into SingPost, again to develop e-commerce package delivery infrastructure in Southeast Asia. And then finally, Alibaba also invested about $68 million into a company called QSI, to also a Singtel-related company, to enhance logistics and fulfillment services in the region. That's just kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of logistics investments. Amazon, many of the key players are all trying to figure that piece out. How do they get the package to the consumer in an efficient and cost-effective and timely way? And we're seeing a lot of innovation around that last mile challenge, particularly in developing economies. And I think that's the area that we're going to see a lot of new activities over the next couple of years, whether it's India or Southeast Asia or even Africa. You'll see companies that are solving that last mile problem, and in so doing, driving e-commerce demand worldwide. Just kind of a fun item here, I included a picture of the world's first drone airport that is being proposed for Rwanda, whereby drones will go into rural areas and at a centralized location and deliver packages. That very likely could be one of many models that will work for e-commerce deliverability in the developing world, and that's an area to keep our eyes on. Another key trend around logistics is online to offline ecosystems, whereby the order is placed online but picked up at a local department store or 7-Eleven or equivalent around the world, and thereby solving that last mile problem in a comprehensive way. On the payment side, this has been a key area of development over the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years. If you go back 8 to 10 years, payment online was still in many ways kind of a dubious thing. A lot of reluctance in different parts of the world to put a credit card online or use a debit card or otherwise make an electronic payment. And it's really notable that pretty much all of that anxiety has been removed from the system, to the extent now that people can pay in pretty much any currency, anytime, on any device, and the friction to e-commerce really has been removed. Another piece that will likely play an important role in the payment side of things over the next couple of years is settlement in renminbi, the China currency, the yuan. That's likely to play a much more important role in the evolution of global e-commerce, particularly, I think, in Southeast Asia. Turning now to m-commerce. So m-commerce, of course, a huge driver for e-commerce worldwide, to the extent now that around 33% of all U.S. e-commerce transactions are mobile, and that's upwards of 40% globally. And the reason that it's higher globally than it is in the U.S. is leapfrogging, whereby newer markets, Brazil, Russia, China, India, have in many ways skipped the desktop version of e-commerce and just gone directly to mobile device e-commerce. We're at a point right now where about 50-50 app versus mobile web sales are taking place. Over the last couple of years, I think some people thought that the app side of that would prevail, That's likely not to be the case. I think particularly as we all think about different opportunity sets, the mobile web I think remains very compelling and very much part of how people like to transact in a mobile environment, and that is not going to go away. One of the key things that we've noticed over the last year is the pressure on public company e-commerce firms to get mobile commerce right. Valuations for those companies very much depend on showing to the analyst community that they can effectively execute on mobile commerce, and that's a huge pressure on them to get it right, and I think we as a marketing company can help in that regard. One of the other pieces that we're watching very carefully are blurring lines in the mobile ecosystem, whereby logistics companies like taxi ride companies will morph into mobile commerce and logistics companies, moving not just people but goods from A to B. An example of that is Uber's merchant delivery program called Uber Rush that's being rolled out in select American cities right now. So I think the seeing Uber bike riders delivering packages at a local level will soon become ubiquitous, and many other players in that taxi app or taxi ride space I think will go down that path. It makes terrific sense, and from a valuation perspective it does as well. One of the key areas that we're also watching in mobile commerce is social messaging platforms, particularly in Asia, like WeChat, QQ, and Viber. All these platforms are terrific and highly kinetic platforms for consumers to use for m-commerce transaction execution, and that's an area that we expect to grow very significantly over the next couple of years. In the United States, what we're seeing is mobile commerce as part of a multi-touch point integrated consumer journey that includes mobile search, in-store beacons, mobile email, and in-app display. It's worth noting that 63% of all emails get opened on a mobile device, so I think that's put a whole fresh breath of wind into email as we've understood it traditionally, and that represents a very important component of marketing strategy for mobile commerce. The last kind of key point driving this new golden age of e-commerce is China. And China is a fascinating part of this story. It could take up an entire presentation on its own, but just to hit some of the highlights here, the key thing that's gone on in the last 15 to 20 years as it relates to China is the globalization of the so-called China price. And the China price, of course, means inexpensive manufacturing that started in China sort of 20, 25 years ago with free trade zones that were established on the coast. At that point, those low manufacturing prices were transferred into the global economy via the wholesale channel. So wholesalers buying from China and they're redistributing into their respective countries. That China price basically reset all of wholesale economics around the world and had a profound effect on the manufacturing ecosystem. What we've seen in the last 10 years, though, is that China price moving from a B2B environment to a B2C environment, whereby China manufacturers can now sell directly to global consumers and, in effect, exporting that very inexpensive China manufacturing phenomenon direct into any of the major or developing economies. So what we witnessed here are basically three waves. The first wave, starting in 1998, was what I call China for China, and this was the first round of e-commerce companies that came into being to serve domestic China consumers, including Taobao and Tmall. At that point, we were also deep into the B2B process, but from China to the world at the wholesale level. But then we've shifted into the final two phases where we've got a B2C phenomenon whereby China is selling from China to the world. And this has been a very, very important e-commerce zone of opportunity, I think, for all of us. And this includes companies like AliExpress, DHgate, JD.com, and many others that are aggressively expanding internationally to take advantage of lower cost manufacturing in China and delivering that cost efficiency to global consumers. Very recently now, I would say in the last kind of year, maybe 18 months, we're witnessing, I think, kind of the final piece of this evolution as it relates to China, which is from the world to China. So in effect, reversing that trend. China has opened up its domestic market to foreign merchants, and companies like Alibaba are very aggressively pursuing foreign merchants to come into China and sell on their Tmall platform. And this includes companies going in like Macy's, Old Navy, Nike, Adidas, Costco, The Gap, and so on. What this will result in is perhaps a reversal of the two pictures that I've put in this slide here, the from China and to China pictures. Traditionally, over the last kind of 20, 30 years, the picture has been coming from China of container ships fully loaded to the brim, and then going back to China pretty much empty. And what we may see now is a long cycle trend of American and European merchants filling up those ships and taking goods from this side of the Pacific back into China, which would be a very, very good thing, an exciting thing, I think, for all parties involved, and likely to have a nice contributory effect to rebalancing trade imbalances. Now, just looking at the extent of this economic opportunity, this is a $2 trillion opportunity, and this is worth kind of pausing to note. It's a gigantic, gigantic opportunity, and if you think sort of typically that in any kind of commerce equation, roughly 15% of the equation is devoted to marketing. So we're looking at somewhere between $200 to $300 billion worth of marketing spend that's going to go on around the world next year as it relates to e-commerce, and a very significant chunk of that, let's say 20%, is likely to be conducted via the affiliate channel. So lots of opportunity for affiliates in this market. Last year, Asia Pacific became the #1 e-commerce market of the three major world regions, and this has been due to technology leapfrogging, the rapid uptake of mobile, and of course a less developed physical retail infrastructure. In China, for example, there are very few what we would recognize as being department stores. So in many ways that whole era has just been skipped, and Chinese consumers are doing that kind of shopping on their mobile devices and computers. What's driving all of this $2 trillion worth of demand? The answer is very simple. It's the new global middle class. This rise of the new global middle class has been a phenomenon. The United Nations describes it as a historic shift not seen for 150 years. And what this has meant is 800 million people have joined the global middle class in the last 10 years. Another 1.5 billion will join in the next 10 years. And this means massive new purchasing demand for apparel, electronics, mobile phones, accessories, home goods, and so on. These are new customers. They're not over-marketed current customers. And this is an important point as it relates to our chat here this morning, because these are new customers that need to be acquired. And that means marketing spend and investment in marketing channels to find and win those new customers. It also means fierce competition by merchants and marketplaces to get those new customers. And fierce competition is a good thing for people like us in the marketing channel. as we work with them to help them find those new customers. Some of the key emerging markets with large middle classes, very briefly. India is now very much coming into the e-commerce mix with significant growing domestic demand. Indonesia, notable in the sense that it's extremely mobile-driven, mobile-intensive shoppers. The Philippines has been a big surprise on the upside over the last 4 or 5 years, and is now one of the strongest growth economies in Asia, so definitely an area of interest. Nigeria will be the next 100 million person internet country. Russia, very keen to buy from Chinese merchants. AliExpress has, for example, 16.8 million registered users in Russia, so a lot of demand going on there. Brazil was very strong until about 3 years ago, experiencing a bit of a slowdown now, but likely a boost coming from the Olympics next year. And in China, of course, going through a historical shift to domestic demand, consumer-driven demand in their economy, and that will have a lot of impact for all of the rest of us. Turning for a moment now to who are some of the key global players in e-commerce markets. There are many. I've just isolated a few here. Alibaba Group, of course, the leader in China. Notably, they're looking to grow their international revenues from 9% to 50%, which will be huge considering the scale of the business right now. They also want to add 10 million new merchants to their platform over the next few years. So they're going to be in a very aggressive merchant acquisition mode. Rocket Internet, a very interesting company to watch. Their ambition is to be the largest internet company outside of China and the United States, working with through companies like Lazada and Zalora and similar in Asia, and as well as different ones in Europe and Middle East. Rakuten, world's third largest e-commerce company, dominant in Japan, very aggressive M&A player, also looking to expand in Southeast Asia aggressively as well. Walmart, obviously very powerful U.S. player, but so far e-commerce is only 3% of their overall sales. And if you look at the scale of that business, obviously a huge amount of upside coming from that company, both in the domestic U.S. market, in e-commerce, as well as international markets. And finally, kind of the original granddaddy in this business, Amazon. They've been making very heavy investments in fulfillment and delivery via platforms like Prime, and they're very strong in Japan and the UK, and very heavyweight player to be reckoned with pretty much in all global markets. One of the key battlegrounds for all of these players is Southeast Asia. All of these players are investing heavily in delivery infrastructure, marketing, and brand building in the Southeast Asia region. Rakuten doing it through M&A, Rocket Internet through organic development. Taobao is now pushing hard into Hong Kong and Taiwan, capitalizing on their very strong China brand recognition. And many smaller local players are jumping up in Indonesia. And definitely watch for all of these players to be investing in O2O over the next couple of years. The winner of the top global e-commerce company position in 2020 will own one of the most valuable assets in all of business, perhaps the most valuable company of all. So this is a big prize to be won, and a lot of people investing very aggressively. So turning a little bit more specifically to the affiliate world, why should affiliates be interested in e-commerce? First of all, it's because e-commerce represents stable, long-term campaigns. It's not a boom-bust cycle. Merchants, as I mentioned earlier, are competing globally for new customers. There's lots of demand, and affiliates are well positioned to help these merchants execute and connect with that brand, with that demand. The affiliate channel is a necessary channel. It's also well known to merchants and marketplaces. It's not a new way of getting the business done. What is new is the global and international scale, and that's the piece that we're focused on right now. As Asia manufactures, the world buys. The merchants and marketplaces coming out of Asia are investing aggressively in marketing, and that means opportunity for affiliates. China and India, their domestic markets are opening up, and also yet again means more demand into the global e-commerce economy. And finally, mobile commerce and mobile traffic. For affiliates that are driving volumes of mobile traffic, e-commerce is an alternative or a counter-cycle to CPI campaigns. So a very nice way to diversify a portfolio of business. Looking a little bit more specifically at traffic and creative, some of the key things to consider as we head into the holiday season here is to be positioned. Understand when these holidays are happening and which geos, and be ready to match traffic to those specific holidays. Really understand the value of non-US traffic. For some affiliates, this is already an area that they're far down the path on. For others, it will take some more homework to really look at their non-US traffic and understand the monetization potential of it. Many of these international traffic monetization opportunities simply did not exist 3 or 4 years ago. So if you haven't taken a fresh look at this in the last year or two, this season is a great time to do it because things have changed dramatically. Of course, it goes without saying, but definitely need to refresh creative around sale and holiday periods, whether it's around coupon codes or specific product initiatives or discounts that are being offered to consumers. Need to keep it very fresh and timely to stay ahead of the pack. And then finally, data. Affiliates who bring an original data story to the market have a distinct advantage. Everybody's interested in unique data sets as they relate to the new global consumer. So what are these days coming up? The big ones, of course, 11/11 is now the biggest e-commerce day of the year. Originally was started by Alibaba kind of 4 or 5 years ago now, and is just a massive day each year, and it has globalized significantly outside of China over the last year or so. They did $9.3 billion in gross merchandise value sales in one day last year. Just a huge, huge performance. Cyber Monday, the big one in the United States, coming up on November 30th. And then there may also be some holidays that you have not been thinking about. So Diwali is an important one for India. This year it also happens to fall on November 11. So this is a huge domestic India shopping day as people are buying new clothes and presents to celebrate the Festival of Lights. And I think that will be a significant day this year. Other ones include Indonesia's Harbolnas, the National Online Shopping Day, which is happening on December 12, and then Boxing Day, which may not be familiar to our American listeners, but is the day after Christmas in the UK, Canada, and Australia, where significant discounts are offered by merchants and represents a big online day as well. Some of the key product categories that affiliates can drive traffic to: apparel, of course, fashion accessories, electronics, mobile phones and accessories, home furnishings and goods, and of course travel. Travel is e-commerce. Campaigns are typically structured around rev shares, so we definitely include it in our e-commerce bucket. Each of these areas are large, $100 billion plus markets. They're huge, and there's a lot of activity in each of them, and we're well positioned in each of those verticals to work with affiliates on. So why source campaigns from global wide media? First of all, we have direct relationships with hundreds of leading and up-and-coming international merchants and marketplaces. We've invested heavily in sourcing international e-commerce campaigns, so we're a one-stop shop to find the best campaigns. Over the last 5 years, we've invested in particular very aggressively in Asia, and we definitely have the top Asian portfolio of e-commerce campaigns. What we do is we curate. We scour the world to find the best partners and negotiate the best terms and deliver up curated portfolios that take a lot of the heavy lifting out of it for the affiliate channel. In our case, we've got 10 years worth of relationships and business experience. We've launched over 20,000 campaigns in that period. We're a pioneer in the 1111 channel for affiliates, significant financial strength, and we really have done our homework over these last 10 years and think we know how to get it done. So heading to the finish line in my webinar this morning, in summary, global e-commerce, why get involved as an affiliate? First of all, to tap into explosive global demand for goods and services delivered online. We're truly into a new golden age of e-commerce, and these are terrific long-term opportunities. There is no bigger single economic opportunity in our industry. At $2 trillion, this is the biggest piece of all, and it chunks down very nicely into discrete verticals, each of which are $100 billion plus verticals, so lots and lots of money and lots of demand from the market. From a historical perspective, China and how it's been operating over the last few years and where it's going has had a profound impact on e-commerce. China going global means lots and lots of demand and a repricing of consumer products worldwide. And the fact that China is now jump-starting its economy from a domestic consumer demand perspective represents yet again a whole new wave of opportunity. Mobile is very rapidly on its way to becoming 50% of all internet transactions. So again, big opportunity area. And finally, e-commerce represents continuous long-term campaigns that monetize international traffic. So that is the bulk of my presentation. I wish you all a very happy Q4 selling season, and I'm just going to turn it over now for maybe about 5 or 8 minutes to see if there are any questions. I'd be very happy to take those, and thank you all very much for tuning in this morning. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here. The first one is, what are your favorite country opportunities? Great question. I find some of the emerging market opportunities terrifically interesting, and I think probably of particular notable interest for affiliates. So these include Russia, which even in spite of a downturn in the economy there, hasn't really seemed to impact e-commerce too much, and the kind of bilateral market interaction between China and Russia is a fascinating thing to watch, and I think there's still a lot of upside in that situation. India, I think, is creating a lot of domestic demand, which could be very interesting for affiliates. And I think we're starting to see some of the first players like Jabong moving out of India and selling to international markets in a similar way that some of the China companies like Alibaba have done. over the last 5 years or so. So those would be a couple of areas I think that are very interesting. The other one would be Indonesia. I think this is a fascinating opportunity country, large population, growing middle class, stable, and significantly centered around mobile commerce and mobile interaction. Another question here is around China. Do you think that China consumer demand is for real? Good question. I think in this sense, because the initiative around growing demand in the domestic China economy is government mandated and part of a long-term economic development plan for China. I think it is very real and will continue to be to probably have a very, very significant impact on the global economy, because that domestic demand for foreign goods really hasn't been part of the equation over the last 10, 15 years. China, of course, being very much an export-driven growth economy, and now it starts to go in the other direction. So I think that represents some very significant opportunity. Good. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. So once again, I'd like to wish all of you a very happy Q4 selling season. We look forward to working with all of you during this period. And again, thank you very much for listening in this morning. Bye-bye.